Welcome to CS 4803, 7643 Deep Learning, and welcome to the start of the fall semester. I have a lot of links on the screen, but you don't need to try to find all of them. I just want to say, you can find, the most important thing is to find our class webpage, and you can find that by just Googling for me. Under my webpage, there's a teaching tab, and you'll be able to find the class webpage, and that has the outgoing links to everything, Piazza, Gradescope, everything. Okay. So I just want to make sure we're all in the right place. You are watching the live stream for CS 4803 Deep Learning 7643. This is the on-campus class. This is not the OMSCS class. So let's just be sure you're in the right place. The Fall 21 delivery format is that this is an online synchronous class. There is no in-person interaction. All the lectures, office hours, homeworks, project submissions, they're all online, and we do not have an exam. And by synchronous, we mean that there is a scheduled lecture time. We are using pre-recorded lectures. We will be using pre-recorded lectures through majority of the semester. We may mix them in with new lectures on some special topics. We'll also consider looking into inviting speakers back for an updated versions of their talks. We will be answering questions live in the pre-recorded lectures that are being played. The recorded lectures are available for viewing later. I see that a question of that nature has already been asked on the BlueJeans app. But we strongly encourage you to attend the lecture time. Think of it as a scheduled watch party, if you will, where it's on your calendar. It is already marked. You can, if you want, you are of course welcome to watch the videos offline at 2x the rate. But during the class time, we will be, I'll be here, one of the TAs will be here every time. We'll answer questions in the middle of, by pausing the pre-recorded lectures. So think of it as an event that you should join. We strongly encourage you to do that. And fundamentally, I think you should remember that you're not here primarily for the content. There's plenty of content online for free. As you've already perhaps noticed in the 3 slides that you're listening to me, my raison d'etre is not my PowerPoint abilities. I'm not the world's best PowerPoint maker. I'm okay. I'm not bad. But you're here for the interaction, the Q&A, the insight, and which you'll have access to only if you come to the lectures. So how to interact? You've already been listening to me through the BlueJeans events app. We're larger than the setup than we can accommodate in regular BlueJeans. So this is BlueJeans events. If you have questions that are of a nature that are technical in nature, that you want a longer answer to, please ask them in the Q&A tool. That way the TAs are on as well. They'll be answering those questions, and those are visible to other students. If you want to respond to our questions, or there's something of an ephemeral nature, please put that in the chat. Right now, I'm looking at the app simultaneously. I'm seeing that there's some questions coming in the chat section, and some are coming in the Q&A section. Actually, right now there's none on the Q&A section. So if you have any sort of anything that is a sustained question, particularly once we start discussing technical topics, please ask them in the Q&A tool, not in the chat tool. The chat tool scrolls by too fast for it to be surviving. If you want to respond to anything that I may have asked you, please put that in the chat. We'll explicitly stop and take questions every X minutes. When we are playing recorded lectures, we will stop those as well. So you will not miss any content. We'll pause, we'll answer questions, and then we'll move on. This is a Blue Jeans event, which means that there is approximately a 10 to 12 second lag between my time and your time. When I say something, there's the streaming lag. So if just be aware of that. When I ask a question, I have to pause for 12 seconds before you folks hear my question and can respond on the chat app. Consequently, if you see me paused and just waiting for responses, that's the reason. There's just a lag that I'm waiting to get over. Okay, so here's the outline for today's lecture. We are talking about deep learning, the field. We'll talk about what this class is about, and then we'll go over some FAQs. If we run out of time for FAQs, we will just post these slides and you'll have access to some asked questions. I'm seeing a question on the chat that says, will there be in-person office hour? First of all, as mentioned, please ask questions like that on the Q&A tool, not the chat. And the answer to that question has already been covered in the video. There is no in-person interaction in this class. This is an entirely asynchronous remote class. Let me just take a look at the Q&A. Okay, is it recommended to have taken CS 4641 ML before taking the class? Yes, intro to ML class is a prereq before this class. I'll talk about that in the what is this class about section. These slides are also available online if you want to skip ahead. But yes, this is also listed on the class webpage. This should not be a first exposure to machine learning. Okay, so let's talk about deep learning. Why are we here? Why are we here for the what are we going to cover in this class? So what are we here to discuss? We are here to discuss some of the most exciting developments in machine learning, computer vision, NLP, speech, robotics, and AI in general in the last decade. Anytime I usually say that, my NLP robotics colleagues get particularly raffled because it's an obnoxious statement to make about the scope of impact here. But I think this is justified. The kinds of things that deep learning has enabled has been pretty interesting. I'm seeing a question in the chat that's asking about differences between grad and undergrad version. First of all, again, please ask that question in the Q&A tool, not the chat. The chat is ephemeral. And second, hold on, we'll cover that in the second half of the lecture. Okay, so let me back up my claim. I like starting with demos. So let's do a quick demo of something that my lab has worked on for many years, but others have as well. This is a web page of a system for visual question answering. It's called VQA. This is a website that my lab has built over the years, where we can upload an image. As a good magician does, they come well prepared with like demo images. But I'll give you all plenty of time to break this demo. Don't worry. And let's start asking questions about this image. So let's switch to a 2016 model, and let's ask what is in this picture. And the answer comes back with the 20% roughly confidence tennis ball, tennis, skateboarder is wrong, racket is right, and so on. What is the person doing? Playing tennis, 98% confidence. What is the person holding? Tennis racket. What is the person about to hit? Tennis ball. What is the person wearing? Shorts. Not quite a tank top, but shorts is right. I'm happy to take questions. So if you put them in the chat, I'll take them. Is there a person driving a car is a question that has been asked. And it's an excellent question. This is someone who understands about data set biases. I'll ask that question in a second. What color is the man's shirt. What is the color of the ball? What is the color of the ball? Yellow. What is the color of the ground? Green and blue, not bad. Now let's start breaking things. Is there a person driving a car? Is there a person driving a car? No? Okay. All right. I was actually surprised. I thought I would break the demo because the data set that this model has been trained on has a yes bias. So it mostly says yes to binary questions. Will it be able to answer who this person is? Let's ask. The quick answer to that is no. It has no identity recognition. Who is this person? There's man, woman, photographer, boy, girl. It's not connected to any person recognition system. This is a neural network trained on a data set of images and questions asked about them with answers coming from a vocabulary. So it's actually not connected to any sort of face recognition or this sort of system. What type of court is the person playing on? What type of court is the person playing on? It's a tennis court that they're playing on. All right, not quite, I think, what you expected, but technically not a wrong answer. Is the man hitting a person? Okay. Let's see if there's a yes bias. Yeah. So it got that wrong. It said yes. It's not hitting a person. So the bag of words model is perhaps a good estimation for what's going on here, although it's not a bag of words model. This is a neural network. We'll cover those things in the class. How many people are in the picture? How many people are in the picture? 2. So that's wrong. And you've identified another bias in the model. So this 2016 model got counting questions mostly wrong. It had a bias towards 2 being the popular one. I will submit this question to the 2018 model. It's just a lot slower, so I'll submit it, and it takes a lot longer time. I expect it to be more accurate. Let's see what it says. In the meantime, I'll read some other questions. How many shadows? Oh, all right. So the 2018 model got it right. It's peaked at 1, so that's good. I will switch back to the 2016 model, which is a lot faster, just for the purposes of the demo. What is the person's race? So I will ask that question in a second, but let's use that question as an opportunity to just talk about because certain questions can be posed as machine learning problems, should they really be? So what's happening behind the scenes is that there's a data set. We've collected pictures. We went to Mechanical Turk. We asked them to ask questions that they think an intelligent system should be able to answer. We went to other humans. We gathered answers corresponding to those questions. So first of all, you have to wonder whether people would ask questions about race of other people in the picture. Second of all, you've got to wonder what sort of answers you're getting in the data set, because you're getting purely perception from third party, from single images. You're not getting self-reported things. And this is ignoring, anything about race being a social construct or anything like that. So we are just looking at a data set with these questions and certain answers to them. And so we should be careful about whether or not this is a good system to deploy where such questions can be asked. But having said that, let's ask it. Okay, those are the answers. These answers are coming from a list of vocabulary. So there's about 1,000 things that this model can say, and then it produces a probability distribution over those things. So some of those are obviously wrong. That is not even in the right answers space, but it puts some mass on them, and we're looking at the top 5 answers. How many shadows are in the image? I suspect if I ask the 2018 model, it'll do better at that. Is the man sitting down? People are trying to trip up the yes bias. Yeah. Let me ask the 2018 model. I suspect it'll get it right. It's actually significantly more accurate. It's just a larger model. It's slower. It's incidentally also running on a slower machine. Okay. What? All right. Is the model, is the man sitting down? No. So the 2018 model got that right. That's good. I will ask the final question. I'll skip over the why is the man so sad. Actually, that's an interesting one. It's a why question. It also has a premise which it's not clear should be true. Why is the man so sad? Um, so you get things that are completely out of distribution. I expect that such questions were not asked of the model. I can ask the 2018, I can run the 2018 model just to be certain, and we'll see. What is the, there's a question, what is the question of life, universe, and everything? I suspect. So why is the man so sad? The top answer from the 2018 model is no, but you see certain interesting trends. Don't know, can't tell, I don't know, which is much more sensible answers. Okay, let me ask one last question and then we'll move on. What is the question of life, universe, and everything? I suspect you mean what is the answer because you want to see 42, but I'll ask the question as well. Of life, universe, and everything. Polo. Yeah, not 42, Polo. Okay. There's a question, are both the 2016 and 2018 model trained on the same data set? Yes. Incidentally, they're trained on the same data set, but they're actually different architecturally. One is just a CNN and LSTM, which you'll learn in the model. The other has co-attention layers and is a hierarchical attention-based model. Okay. You actually did mean the question. It was the question of life, universe, and everything. Fish is the question. Okay, let's move on. So hopefully people enjoyed that thing. So what we were looking at is a deep learning system that can answer questions about images. You will hear, in order for us to understand what deep learning is, we have to step back and answer what is machine learning and what is artificial intelligence. So I actually like starting with this question of like, what is intelligence? Because turns out defining artificial intelligence is hard, but not because the artificial part is hard. Defining intelligence is hard. Once you define intelligence, turns out defining artificial intelligence is pretty easy. Where people disagree on is the definition of intelligence, not the artificial part. So what is intelligence? The boring textbook answer that you'll hear is, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, blah, 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 which is fine. This is the kind of definitions that you learn that are meaningless, that you don't ever use. I particularly like this definition from Siddharth Mukherjee, who's a faculty member at Columbia. I encourage you to listen to this Radiolab. It's a podcast series on NPR, and they have a series called G, which stands for General Intelligence, where he defines, the ability to navigate in problem space. He asks the listener to imagine to sort of make a comparison to athleticism and imagine a general athlete as opposed to a specialist athlete. So don't think about any particular sport. We understand what it takes to get really good at a sport, and then you have extremely specialized set of skills. But imagine a friend of yours or someone who you think is generally a good athlete. And then imagine them moving in physical space. That movement demonstrates an understanding of the laws of physics and of their own embodiment in their body, and a sort of awareness that is fairly hard to define precisely, but we understand when we see it, that someone is a good navigator. They have a good control of the physical space. And what I'd like you to imagine is a sort of abstract problem space, and the ability to navigate smoothly in problem space is how you might define sort of general intelligence, if you will. Admittedly, this is not a precise definition, but I think it's not precise for a good reason. We, as a society, as a community, we've just not been able to answer this question. It's a difficult question to answer. And once you define intelligence, defining artificial intelligence is somewhat easy. The boring textbook answer is, well, intelligence demonstrated by machines. That part's easy. I particularly like this definition from Andrew Moore, who is the Dean of Computer Science at, or yeah, he's at CMU, and he defined it as the science and engineering of making computers behave in ways that until recently we thought required human intelligence. I like this definition because it has encoded in it a notion of moving goalpost, which is what the history of AI has experienced over and over again. We initially thought chess playing agents would demonstrate intelligence. Turns out you solved chess and people just stopped thinking of that as intelligence. We thought Go playing agents would be considered, would tell us something about intelligence. Turns out they don't. They give us an insight into a fairly narrow domain, but humans go ahead and redefine intelligence to exclude whatever machines are now capable of doing. So this is an interesting definition in that regard. That it captures the notion of moving goalpost that AI tends to suffer from. It's hard to declare success when your success is immediately redefined as not intelligence. So what is machine learning? When you realize that the definition of intelligence talks about acquiring knowledge and skills, that right there encodes in it a notion of acquisition and brings us to learning. So the definition of learning or machine learning, which is at the heart of intelligence, is the study of algorithms that improve their performance at some task with experience. I really like this definition. It sort of nicely captures a notion of learning. It's a formal notion of learning as opposed to sort of a colloquial, informal notion of learning. So come up with an algorithm, and you have to have the ability to measure performance at some task and you have to be able to say what an experience is. And a lot of what we'll be doing in the course of this semester is exploring these concepts. Okay, so what is deep machine learning, or sometimes also known as representation learning, the study of neural networks? You'll hear terms like deep unsupervised learning, deep reinforcement learning, deep structured learning. Those are all variants of the underlying fundamental concept, which is deep learning. And we'll talk about exactly what makes deep learning in 1 second. Let me just take a look if there are any questions coming in on the Q&A tool. I believe most of these questions have been answered. Right. There's one that I'm not seeing a response to, which is how many labeling functions went into this NLP project? Did you even use labeling functions? I'm not sure what you mean by labeling functions. I imagine this is asking about the VQA demo. So first of all, it's not a pure NLP project. It's a vision and language project because you have images and you have questions. We went to Mechanical Turk to collect that data of questions and answers. Other questions have been answered. Is this model just based on Mechanical Turk and human answers? Is the machine learning just to understand the question, trying to map those to answers? The answer to that is it's a machine learning system, which you should have some exposure to machine learning. It maps a question and an image to an answer. So there are 1,000 possible answers that it can give. 1,000 is just an arbitrary choice. You can create any answer vocabulary that you'd like. The model's job is to take in an image and a question and output a probability distribution over the space of answers. And the parameters of that model are trained using a data set that we have collected. What that model is, it consists of a convolutional neural network and an RNN. What those terms mean, that's what we'll teach you in this class. How is that done? Through stochastic gradient descent, also something that we'll teach you in this class. So the details yet to come, don't worry about it. There's a question, can intelligence not be defined simply as comprehending and answering the problem? Well, you're trying to define, so answering the problem depends what the problem is. It may not require a question, but I suspect what this question is really trying to get to is problem solving. The problem with this definition is that anytime you try to narrowly define a problem and say the ability to solve this problem, very quickly we A, we are able to come up with algorithms that just do that, and B, we very quickly realize that that's not what intelligence is. That our notion of intelligence is somehow tied to this ability to solve many problems, not just a single problem, and in fact have the ability to solve problems, to solve new problems and create new problems. So that's kind of why this definition that you're trying to get to ends up being inadequate. Okay, I'm not seeing any new questions on the Q&A tool. Do we need to learn all PyTorch syntax by yourself, or will there be a workshop? You need to be familiar with Python. We will not be teaching you how to use Python. Whatever relevant PyTorch things that we need you to do, we will give you pointers to those. I will say this explicitly towards the end of the lecture. This is not a learning how to use PyTorch class. That's not what this is about. Most of this class is about learning fundamental concepts. We will be using PyTorch, and yes, we do expect a lot of we'll give you pointers about what to use from PyTorch relevant libraries, but there is a lot of picking up those things along the way while accomplishing the homework required. I apologize if this was already answered. Will there be a structure of the class time discussion? Okay. Yes, looks like you missed it at the beginning of the class. This class is fully synchronous, remote. There is no in-person interaction in this class. We will be using pre-recorded lectures for the rest of the semester. We will be answering questions during the class time in the middle of those recorded lectures. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A tool. For any ephemeral discussion, you can use the chat tool, but the TAs are monitoring the Q&A tool and answering. You're asking whether you can ask questions via a mic. We're using BlueJeans events. This is a streaming service, and so no, we cannot actually elevate you to a presenter to ask questions via mic. Can we use TensorFlow instead of PyTorch? You may not. For your project, you're free to do whatever you want. For the homeworks, those are pre-created. They're starter code. We have templates that we've provided you, and that has been created on PyTorch. Look, I'm sorry. This is one of those hammer A versus hammer B type things. Anytime we don't care about starter code, you can do whatever you want, which is the project. Anytime we have to create starter code, it takes time and resources to invest in something. We made a choice. We think it's a reasonable choice. Sorry, we just have to go with that. We can't provide you starter code in PyTorch, in TensorFlow. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. I will move on from this point. So what is deep learning or deep machine learning? In my mind, there are three primary ideas that make something deep learning. There is the idea of hierarchical compositionality. There's the idea of end-to-end learning, and there's the idea of distributed representation. These ideas are good to understand separately because they can be combined with each other. They don't always have to be. I think of these ideas as somewhat orthogonal. You can have one without the other. Although in most deep learning papers, you tend to see them, A, not explicitly spelled out, and B, come together in interesting ways. So let's try to understand these ideas about hierarchical compositionality. And their core idea is that we have cascades of nonlinear transformations of our data. And by that, what I mean is that compositionality is composing, as the word suggests, composing sophisticated objects from simpler objects. We see this happen in all sorts of modalities, data, problem domains. In computer vision, for example, pixels may come together to form edges, which may come together to form texture elements, parts of objects, ultimately objects. In sort of NLP, characters may come together to form words, noun phrases and verb phrases, to form clauses, sentences, and ultimately higher order or sophisticated objects like stories. What we'd like to do is express this idea that complicated things are composed of simple things mathematically. And it's a very simple idea that we can compose a complicated function out of simpler functions. Most of machine learning will be function approximation. And for us, the ability to compose sophisticated functions from a library of simple functions, you can do that in one way by taking linear compositions. This is what boosting does. This is what kernel methods like SVMs do. These should be things that you've seen in an intro to machine learning class. In deep learning, we will often see cascaded compositions. By that, what I mean is we will see function G1 applied to a function G2, applied to a function G3, applied to function Gn, which is applied to our data X, which is input. So we're expressing a complicated function as a cascade of compositional functions, of simpler functions. This idea is not unique to deep learning. This also happens in other domains like probabilistic graphical models, grammar models, and so on. But you should be aware of this idea. And so we can think of, this sophisticated log of cosine of exponent of sine cube of x as a sequence of transformations. X comes in, we take a sine, then we take its cube, then we take an exponent, then we take a cosine, then we take a log. Each of these individual compositional boxes only does something simple. Together, when applied in this order, they do something far more complicated. And this can be applied to data domains like images, where we initially will end up with low-level extraction of features, then mid-level features, and high-level features. These are just descriptions. In your homeworks, you will create visualizations of this kind, where you will visualize what a neural network is doing at the lower-level layers, at the middle layers, at the higher layers, and you will see interesting structure emerge from those in those models. Let me take a look at questions, and I'll move on to the second point. Is the difficulty of this course similar to CS 4641? I see it's already been responded, so I'll move on from that. Is there another textbook on PyTorch recommended in addition to the deep learning textbook, or will we study PyTorch based on the class materials along the way? We can take a look at this offline. I am not aware of any standard book. There's lots of online material on PyTorch. We will give you pointers on where to go look. I don't expect you to be hunting through documentation without any pointers, but we can take a look at this offline. Currently deployed ML systems starkly differ from humans in collecting experience. Also, ML systems are mostly limited to tasks. Do you think ML community needs to work in these two directions to approach general human intelligence? Yeah, I think people are working on creating new tasks, and people do work on collecting experience in many different ways. I don't think of this as something that the machine learning community doesn't do. I think there's work on this. You'll see this in some of the papers that we assigned to you to read in the various homeworks. Okay, so let's move to the second idea, which is end-to-end learning. So in a lot of one sort of key distinguishing factor between deep learning systems that you're going to be seeing in this class and any sort of machine learning systems that you may have seen like an intro to ML class, or what was typically done or was just called traditional machine learning, is that there often was a divide between the machine learning part of the problem and the handcrafted or domain expertise part of the problem. In computer vision, there is a rich literature on taking images and then handcrafting features or converting the RGB pixel values of an image into some sort of feature vector that can be fed into a machine learning system. In speech, the same thing with MFCC coefficients. In NLP, there's an entire rich literature on these things called bag of words models, where you come up with a vocabulary, you define a sentence as a histogram over the vocabulary, and so on. So there was often this divide between what is fixed that you do based on domain knowledge about the data or the problem domain and what is actually learned. And it consequently gave rise to this entire field called feature engineering, where you decided that, okay, I understand this problem. I understand images have pixels. Pixels can be grouped together into grids. Grids, I can compute gradients of intensity values. I can take histograms, and so I can define various sorts of feature descriptions. In machine learning, the view, so this, learned versus not learned. And in deep learning, the view that we're going to take is there is no such thing as hand-defined defining features, we will learn the entire pipeline, whatever comes. So we will try to have everything up to the data. So X being our data, so pixel values, speech signals, words directly. We will learn everything from that data directly and not have any sort of handcrafted or domain-specific representations that are then fed into a machine learning system. In some sense, this will break down a divide. There was a very nice divide between feature extractor and a classifier. In deep learning systems, we will not have any such divide. There will be just feature transformations that can also be viewed as classifiers. There is no such thing as a classifier and a feature extractor divide. So that's the idea of end-to-end learning, going from one end of a pipeline to another. Typically at one end of a pipeline is what do you care about, and then the other end is data, so output to input. The third idea that is fairly common is this idea of distributed representations of no single dimension encoding everything and groups of dimensions working together. And I'd like to explain that with a diagram. This concept I really like, which is, imagine that our universe, our data set, our world consists of just these four objects, these four shapes: a vertically elongated rectangle, a horizontally elongated rectangle, a vertically elongated ellipse, a horizontally elongated ellipse. And let's say this is our representation. What does this mean? This is a 5-dimensional vector. We look at the rows of this. This is a 4-dimensional vector. This is called a one-hot representation. What we will do is, because we have 4 objects, we created a 4-dimensional vector, and we just put a 1. A black dot here represents 1. An open circle represents 0. And so this is 1, 0, 0, 0. That's our representation for a vertically elongated rectangle. 0, 1, 0, 0 is our representation for this one, and so on. And if we want to represent the no pattern, we'll just do all zeros. So this is a particular representation for this set of shapes. Here is a different representation for the same set of shapes. So the shapes haven't changed, but now in those 4 dimensions, I have 1, 0, 1, 0, and I have 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 0, 0, 1, and so on. And my question to you, which you can answer on the chat tool, is, can someone tell me what these 4 dimensions represent? What are these 4 dimensions trying to capture? I'll wait for people to guess what the 4 dimensions are in the chat tool. Long and round is one guess. Vertical, horizontal, rectangular, round. Vertical, horizontal, square, ellipse. The first 2 are orientation. The second one are shapes. First 2 are orientation. Second 2 are round, rectangle, horizontal, vertical. Axes. The first 2 are tall versus wide. The last 2 are, yep. I think there's a few subtle mistakes being made, but generally most people are getting exactly the concept. Yep, and this last one gets exactly right. The first dimension corresponds to vertical. The second dimension corresponds to horizontal. Third dimension corresponds to rectangular or squarish, and the fourth one to ellipse or circlish. And so 1, 1 here means that this is a vertical rectangle. 1, 1 here means this is a horizontal rectangle. 1, 1 here means that this is a vertical ellipse and a horizontal ellipse. I have an interesting answer: edges 1, 0 and axes XY, which is interesting, which is, I imagine, trying to express the same phenomena. I don't quite understand what edges mean in that sense. But with these as axis labels, the interesting that you can do is, in a distributed representation, you can turn on more bits in your encoding, and you can ask for what this means. You can have new ways of expressing things that you haven't seen. So when you do vertical plus horizontal plus your ellipse, so vertical is on, horizontal is on, and ellipse is on, you get roughly what should correspond to a circle, because it is both vertically and horizontally elongated, and so you get a circle. In a local representation where each of the axes corresponded directly to one of the symbols, you ended up with things that are perhaps uninterpretable. What is a vertical rectangle plus a horizontal rectangle plus a horizontal ellipse? It's unclear what that corresponds to. So in our distributed representation, we can express new things that we haven't seen in our training data set. And this is the power of distributed representations. The problem, of course, is that these four names, vertical, horizontal, rectangular, ellipse, are something that you and I just came up with. We looked at the pattern and we came up with those names because this was an easy pattern. But imagine I had trained a neural network and I found out that this is how an intermediate layer in the neural network was representing this pattern. That instead of 1, 0, 1, 0, there was a four-dimensional scalar values where this was close to 1, this was close to 0, this was close to 1, this was close to 0, and so on. And I recorded those values from a neural network. I would have a hard time telling you what each of the dimensions in those representations means. These names are often hard to give to those dimensions, but our goal is that we will learn such distributed representations directly from data. In some sense, these distributed representations factorize the concept space that represent these concepts. And that's what we're trying to learn directly from data. Okay. The interesting things that you can do is once you have these compositional distributed representation vector spaces, you can do vector algebra. So you can embed the phrase United States into some vector space. You can embed the phrase dollar into some vector space, the phrase Mexico into a vector space, and so on. And you can ask questions like analogies, X is to Y as Z is to what. And so what you're really asking is, well, if I take the embedding in a vector space for dollar, subtract United States, that gives me a particular direction and a magnitude. Can I add that to Mexico to get that answer? And turns out that you can actually learn this from large corpuses of data, and they actually represent interesting things. A few years ago, someone had made this cute tool, this plus that.me, where you could type in A minus B plus C, and it would give you, for movies, The Matrix minus thoughtful plus dumb, and it would give you a similar movie with those factors encoded. And I will not comment on the accuracy of this outcome. I will, of course, say, as someone who saw The Matrix come out in the 90s, yeah, the ordering is right. Like, definitely, the Matrix is the better movie. Okay, so those are the few ideas. I think hierarchical compositionality, end-to-end learning, and distributed representations that come together to form what we think of as the basis for deep learning. You will see these ideas perhaps not explicitly called out, but forming the basis for a lot of the papers and the topics that you study in this class. The benefits of deep learning tend to be, it usually leads to better performance on some of the tasks. There are obvious caveats, and those caveats are given enough data in compute. In low data regime, you can often be better off with shallower models. We are assuming similar train test distributions, IID distributions of data. We're assuming non-adversarial evaluation. So under those assumptions, generally the historical trend is that when you use these ideas, they lead to better performance. It enables us to go to new domains without experts. So we can, because we're doing end-to-end learning, you don't actually need to understand the science, or you don't need to understand. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Let me make sure that it doesn't come across as I'm dismissing science or domain expertise. What I am saying is it enables you to go to new domains where there may not be experts yet, or expert time is costly, and quickly construct models that are able to leverage data that would be hard to get human expertise on. And that's been one of the determining factors for successes of deep learning. There's a sort of famous quote from Fred Jelinek, who ran IBM's speech recognition machine translation lab in the 90s. And it's sort of been an interesting folklore of this quote, where every time I fire a linguist, the performance of our speech recognition system goes up, which is usually the argument thrown in favor of we don't need to understand the how humans solve problems, or how we believe we should be solving problems in order to build systems that can leverage information data. Another benefit of deep learning or representational learning tends to be modularity. You will see this in this class, but we will basically teach you to think of blocks or modules as Lego blocks, and you'll be able to construct them in a directed acyclic graph. We will teach you what that is, but you'll be able to construct input-output functions by plugging and playing different modules together. So the visual question answering demo that we showed you consisted of a CNN and an RNN plugged together. And in fact, that's been one of the reasons why the field of vision and language has been able to make so much progress, because we have shared modules and tools that can be easily plugged and played together. We've talked about benefits, so let's balance it out with problems with deep learning that are good to cover up ahead of time. The number one problem in deep learning tends to be the lack of a formal understanding. For reasonably deep models that we will construct, for most interesting models that we will construct, most losses that we will use, they will be non-convex in their parameter, which means that all guarantees are out. There are no guarantees on the optimization process that we set up for training, and consequently, there are no guarantees for generalization from training to test. And worse still, our existing intuitions from classical statistical learning theory don't seem to carry over. We believe that most of these models, our classical statistical learning theory says, when you have highly overparameterized models, you should not be able to learn. Generalization should be poor. But we end up trying these methods, and they end up working really well. And so theoretically, we're essentially stumbling in the dark here. We do not understand why things work. Things seem to work when they should not be working. Our theory says it shouldn't work. And when they don't work, we don't know why it doesn't work. So we're really stumbling in the dark when it comes to a formal understanding of some of these systems. The standard response is an optimistic response, that this just means there's a new theory to be constructed. The defining process in science is that when you find a physical phenomena that surprises you, that where your existing theories break down, that tells you that you have some new theories to construct. You have a job to do. You have experiments to be explained. And so this is an optimistic response, that there's work to be done here. There is somewhat of an informal response, which is a claim that all interesting learning problems are non-convex, which you can agree or disagree upon. And then there's the more sort of joking response, which is standard response number 2. Yes, but it often works. Things just work. And so therefore, we must continue pressing along. Let me take a look at questions and see if there's anything that's come in. Given that interpretability is one of the issues with deep learning, do you see a future in which we will be able to better understand and interpret the inner layers of complex neural network architectures? Yeah, I'm actually quite hopeful about that. I think there's already a lot of work that has been done in that space. I think in homework 3, you will work on visualization techniques for convolutional neural networks, and you'll see that there's interesting progress being made in that field. Other things have been answered. Okay, so I'll move on. The second problem, which is directly the topic of that question, is lack of interpretability. It is extremely hard when things fail to know why things are failing. And we can contrast this with pipeline systems. I'll tell you what pipeline systems are. You've already seen me use that phrase. But in pipeline systems, we actually have something called an oracle performance. We can feed in ground truth till some performance and know how well, where are things breaking. End-to-end systems, it's hard to do that. Let me show that with respect to this example. So this is a problem of image captioning. The input is an image and the output is a sentence. A woman is holding a camera in a crowd. A group of people are shopping at an outdoor market. These two are figures from two papers that appeared approximately at the same time. At CVPR in 2015, there was, roughly 4 or 5 papers that tackled and made progress on image captioning at the same time. These two papers, I would say, were philosophically at a stark endpoints of the spectrum. On the left was an entirely pipeline system. It would first detect words or regions that correspond to nouns. So there's a crowd detector, there's even a verb, so holding detector, a woman detector, a camera detector, a cat detector, which is misfiring, and so on. So you have a bunch of nouns and verbs that are detected in regions. Then you generate plausible sentences using a language model that uses those words. So you try to construct multiple sentences using those words, a purple camera with a woman and so on. And then you re-rank those sentences. This is one approach. This is a pipeline system. It has stages. In such a system, you can ask the questions: when things don't work, did you not detect the right regions? Did you not detect the right nouns, the right verbs? Did you construct sentences in an illogical or ill-grammatical way? Did you re-rank them poorly? Did you rank them based on interestingness or boringness or safeness? And so we can plug and play ground truth at various stages and see what happens to the downstream accuracy, and we can know where things are failing. This is a well interpretable system in that regard. At the other end of the spectrum was an architecture that you will see in class and you will play around with in one of the homeworks as well, where there's an image goes in, it's processed through a convolutional neural network. Don't worry about what these blocks mean. We will teach you some of those convolutional blocks in this class. It is then fed, 512 dimensional embedding comes out of the image. It is fed into a recurrent neural network called an LSTM. Don't worry about what that is. We will teach you that as well. And ultimately, it just spits out some words. The problem with this architecture is that when things don't work, you don't know what the embedding, what a 512 dimensional embedding for an image is supposed to be. You can't plug in ground truth. You don't know what it's supposed to give you. And so you don't know, is the LSTM failing? Is the CNN failing? Is my vocabulary too large, too small? Learning rate too large, too small? Like, where are the problems? So it's very hard to debug these pipelines. And the standard response to these things is, well, there are tricks of the trade. We visualize features, you add losses at different layers, you pre-train to avoid degenerate initializations, and these are all things that you'll see in this class. So effectively, the standard response is, we're working on it. And standard response number 2 continues to be, yes, but it often works. And the third problem with deep learning is the lack of easy reproducibility. And it's a direct consequence of the stochasticity and the non-convexity that we've already discussed. Different initializations will lead to different local minima. And so depending on how much you're controlling for stochasticity, it can be an extreme pain and nightmare. We're dealing with extremely sensitive systems where it's hard to know, like it is surprisingly common to end up with a model that you cannot reproduce. It is surprisingly common to say that I have a system, it works well on the data set, but I can't do this again because I did some things in the middle and it ended up here converging and I can't reproduce this process. This model works, it has high accuracy, even on held out data, but I don't know how I got it and I can't do this again. And this is a direct consequence of stochasticity and non-convexity. This is not typically a problem that happens with convex models where you're guaranteed convergence rates and all the nice things that you get with convexity. The standard response to these problems is that it's getting much better. There are now standard toolkits, libraries, and frameworks, PyTorch, TensorFlow, MXNet, and others leading the way. And so a lot of collective human judgment and knowledge has been baked into these libraries. I often, draw the analogy to QP solvers or LP solvers, linear programming or quadratic programming solvers. Theoretically, they are well understood, and you should be able to implement your own QP solver if you wanted to. However, if you did that, you would not get the same results as a standard library. There is a lot of collective judgment and understanding and preconditioning and other things that have gone in to build standard QP solvers. that makes them stable, robust, reproducible, that has yet not happened for this field. It is happening. We now have strong platforms to build on, but it's getting better. And of course, the standard response is yes, but it often works, which is why we keep plugging along. And as you can probably tell, the "it often works" is doing a lot of heavy lifting in our field. Okay, so that was everything that we wanted to cover about deep learning. We can answer a couple of logistical questions about the class, and I just want to take a look at questions. Does the lack of reproducibility issue hold true even set random seeds and somehow ensure the same initialization? It is often controlled for, so you can get reproducibility, but it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of sensitivity in your systems remaining even after reproducibility. That two different random seeds will have bigger margin of gap in their performance than state-of-art versus non-state-of-art models. And so those issues still remain, but your question is correct. You're right in your assertion. What is the definition of an oracle? An oracle is some sort of an upper bound where you can plug in ground truth parts of the system. So an oracle, the word comes from a seer who knows everything. And so this is sort of another word for partial ground truth, if you will. I see responses have already come in to these things. Okay. Will some of the ideas from the new textbook Principles of Deep Learning Theory by Show, will that be covered? No, absolutely not, which gets us to the next set of questions. I think let me answer those immediately now. What is this class about? This class is an introduction to deep learning. Let me be very clear about that. It's an introduction to deep learning. And the goal is, after finishing this class, you should be ready to get started on your first deep learning research project. You will understand what CNNs are, what RNNs are, what deep reinforcement learning is, what generative models like VAEs and GANs are. You do not need to understand what those terms mean right now. That is our job. We will teach you that. The target audience is senior undergrads, although we also have sometimes juniors, and actually I've never had a sophomore, but we've had juniors take this class as well, MS students and new PhD students. This is absolutely not a class for research active advanced grad students already working in these areas. If you're looking for a formal theoretical understanding of deep learning, you will not find it here. I would argue you will not find it at most places, including research papers, because it doesn't exist yet. But that is not even an attempt being made here. This is a rigorous class, but it is not an advanced PhD class. It is meant for, it's an intro class for seniors and first-year grad students. It is not meant for people who already have the basics and want to understand the latest and the greatest cutting-edge research. This is not a paper reading class. This is what I'd like to call an eat your vegetables first class. We are going to eat our vegetables. We're going to understand the basics. We are not going to jump to the fancy stuff that gives you the sugar buzz. It is absolutely not for students looking to graduate with a deep learning class on their resume. This is not an easy class. This is a rigorous class. We are not teaching you a toolkit. This is not an intro to TensorFlow or PyTorch class. You will use PyTorch. You are free to use TensorFlow during your project. But that's not the intention. You will learn a lot of basics and fundamentals in this class. It is also not an intro to machine learning class. This should not be your first introduction to machine learning. We do expect you to know what, for example, a classifier is, what overfitting is, what underfitting is, what a loss function is. You should have already seen that in an intro to deep learning, intro to machine learning. I just said this. This should not be a first introduction. You will need a formal class, not just self-reading or Coursera. If you took any of these things at Georgia Tech, you're in the right place. You can also see what topics we covered. Here are the prerequisites. Intro to machine learning. There's a lot of linear algebra and calculus. Seriously, there is a lot of gradients. There are gradients everywhere. You will be taking a lot of derivatives in this class by hand, even though that is not what you will do professionally. If you do it professionally, because PyTorch and TensorFlow and automatic gradient differentiation libraries make it very easy for you, but we will make you compute gradients by hand because it builds character. That's, as I said, eat your vegetables class. We will do that. There's a lot of programming. So there are 5 homeworks. Each one of them will contain a programming assignment as well. We will be using Python. The libraries are PyTorch. We've already discussed why. For your project, you're free to use any language, any framework, any library of your choice. We do not care. I'm the instructor. I'm a faculty member in IC. My name is Dhruv Batra. You feel free to use my first name. You can call me Dhruv. If you're not comfortable, you can call me Professor Batra if you like, but I'm perfect. My students call me Dhruv. That's okay. Here are the PAs that are going to be dealing with most of your questions, that are creating the assignments. These people have taken this class before. A number of them have TA'd for this class before. The head TA is Joanne Chuang, who's a PhD student in the School of Interactive Computing. You'll be hearing from them on Piazza and during their office hours. I strongly encourage you to go to the office hours, talk to them, and get feedback on your projects and homeworks and other things like that. What's the nitty-gritty, the deliverables? What does this course look like? You have to do 4 problem sets and homeworks. Each problem set and homework is 20% of the grade. So that gets you to 80% of the grade. There is a final project, which is equivalent work to a homework. So it's another 20%. We will actually give out 5 homeworks. You only need to submit 4 of them. There is buffer built into this class, so you can pick one of the homeworks and decide not to do them. The homeworks consist of theory and implementation. The first one goes out next week, I believe, or soon-ish. PS0 is already out, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so this is what roughly the grade distribution and class workload looks like. There's no exam. There are no other quizzes or anything. This is exactly what you have to do. You have to do 4 homeworks, do a class project. And there's some bonus for class participation on Piazza. There is a lot of buffer built in, to the point that I actually get made fun of by my colleagues. I have a reputation for being easy. I'm not that easy, but I'm gonna say there's a lot of buffer built into this class. There are 7 free late days. These are 7 days. You can be late on your homeworks. You can submit. We count a 24-hour chunk. We're not going to be counting minutes or hours. So if you're a minute late, you've used one of your late days. You do not have to ask permission before using your late days. We'll just count your submission time on Gradescope. You can use all 7 of them at once. Please do not. You can use them one at a time for one of the homeworks. You cannot use them for project-related deadlines because they are at the end of the semester, and you cannot use them for PS0 because we have a sharp turnaround for that. But other than that, you can be plenty late in the semester, and you don't need our permission to use them. After the late days are used up, you have 25% penalty for each late day that you give us. So 4 late days and you're done. Everything gone. I say this every semester, and I will say this now as well. There will be at least 1 or 2 of you who, despite me saying this, will use all 7 late days on the first homework. Please do not do that. Do not do that and hold your late days till November. Things will start to get crunched. You will have multiple deadlines. You will maybe have a travel come up, or you have something else come up. Please hold on to these late days till the end of the semester, because it buys you a flexibility that you will be able to use at the right time. If you come to us after using all of your late days and say, I have this deadline or I have something else come up, my question to you is that you'll need not just 1 excuse, you need 8 excuses. You need to tell me what you did with all your late days. And my answer after these 7 is a hard no. I do not believe in making one-off decisions. That's why I gave these late days to everybody in the class. And the answer after this is no, we're not making any more accommodations after that. So please hold on to them till when you really need them, and there's crunch time. Okay, Problem Set Zero is out today. It's due August 26th. It is available on the class webpage and Piazza and Canvas. It does not count towards your final grade, but it is required that you submit it. Anything less than 75% means that you may not be prepared for this class. The reason for Homework Zero is it is a way to calibrate yourself against expectations of this class. We don't it is okay to go back and look at material that you may be rusty on, but if you spot concepts that you have never studied, that you have no idea, you were never taught those concepts, then that may be an indication that you're going to have an extremely rough time, that you should come back after taking something. The point of Homework Zero is please try to do it yourself. There's no collaboration allowed on Homework Zero. The point is calibration. Are you in the right place? Do you feel you're well prepared to take this class? Because that's what all the homeworks are going to be like, at least the theory portions. So please do Homework Zero and submit it by August 20th. Okay, let me take a question and then I'll get to the level differentiation. Is there a recommended time limit for PS0? No, we don't care. There's a deadline, but you can take however much time you want. If we decide to turn in a homework without it being completed and do not want to use a late day, would that be decided? I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding this question, but yes, whenever you submit your homework, the last submission of your homework on Gradescope is what we use to calculate your late days. And so, yes, you can submit it on time, submitting less than the full percentage of the homework, and that's fine. We don't care, but if you submit it again while the submissions are being accepted, then we will count that, and we will mark your late days based on that. So we keep track of your last submission on Gradescope. So please just don't submit if you don't want to use late days. Okay, this has been answered. Can there be a one-person team for the project? We'll talk about that in some of the later classes. We strongly encourage you to form teams. It's a good way of working in a group. We understand that you sometimes are unable to, that there's something that other people are not interested in, you're doing a particular research already, you'd want to club it in with that, in which case we will allow it. You'll find us to be generally flexible as long as you're doing the right things, but we encourage you to try and form teams while you can. Will we have access to GPU cluster resources? Yeah, looks like it's been responded to. Yes, you'll have access to that. Logistical question. I'm waitlist 45. So this is a common FAQ question. I don't control the waitlist. I don't know if the course size will be expanded. We are, bound by the number of TAs that we get. This has been surprisingly hard to find the relevant and experienced TAs for this. I don't think the class size will expand significantly. Can you transform a non-convex space into a convex space through a functional composition to make solving the optimization problem easier? Sometimes. Excellent question. Sometimes, but not in general. It's a hard open question. And obviously, everything cannot possibly be transformed. Otherwise, there would be no non-convex functions. Everything would be solvable. You would have solved NP-hard problems. Okay, I think these questions. If I submit homework on time, then want to make changes, will I be able to use late days to resubmit? Sure. If the window is still open, yes, you can. We will take your last submission and we'll take that. However, please don't. Just try to submit it once, make up your mind. Okay. Level differentiation between 4803 and 7643. In the homework, there are extra credit questions. There are questions marked extra credit for 4803 students that are necessary for 7643 students. The lectures are the same, and I do want to say we will largely treat you like grad students. This is your exposure to what it feels like to be treated as grad students. This is a rigorous, intro grad class. And so you should adjust your expectations accordingly. We are not going to be treating you or coddling you as undergrads. One thing that we are doing this year is that we're giving you the option of doing 5 homeworks instead of 4 homeworks plus project. This option only exists for the undergrads, for 4803s. We still strongly encourage you to do a project. We're just giving you this option because we understand that sometimes undergrads may not be involved in research and may not have ideas for open-ended project. We think you can still get those ideas by talking to TAs. So if you can, we encourage you to do the project. But if you just like a structured homework assignment type experience, then you can do all 5 of the homeworks. And that's an option available only to the 4803 students. Okay, let me take some questions. What should I do if I don't understand the questions concepts on PS0? You should consider taking one of the prereq classes, doing some refreshers, and coming back in a different semester. It will be an extremely rough time if you find concepts to be surprising in homework 0. It means that what's coming downstream you'll be uncalibrated for. So my recommendation would be to come back after taking something else, perhaps a math foundations class or one of the prereqs. Okay. All right, let me take some FAQs about the waitlist. The class is full. It's unlikely that the size will increase. My recommendation would be to do problem set 0 if you're on the waitlist. Come to the first few classes. The lectures are open to anybody at Georgia Tech, and you hope that people drop the class, and you'll get off from the waitlist into the class. If you need this class to graduate, please talk to your program advisor, your degree program advisor. We do not have this kind of information available to us. They have insight that we don't have. They will help you with options to graduate on time. Auditing or pass failing, we will give preference to, because this is an oversubscribed class, we are giving preference to people taking the class for credit. And so we are not approving any requests for pass fail or audit. If you send us that request in the middle of the semester, we will decline it. So please don't assume to take this pass fail. Sitting in is welcome. The lectures are being streamed. They're pre-recorded, so you can do that. The regrade policy is that you have to let us know within 1 week of receiving the grades if there's anything wrong. The regrade requests are handled through Gradescope, and you should submit it through there. And let me be clear, this is, well, it's not an advanced grad class, it's an intro grad class, but we are treating you like grad students. The goal is to understand the material and making progress towards our research, towards understanding how to do research using deep learning. The goal here is not to bicker over points. So please keep that mindset. The collaboration policy is that we encourage you to collaborate on everything except homework 0. You must do homework 0 individually. You can discuss the questions when you collaborate. So we're now no longer talking about homework 0. We're talking about other homeworks and projects. You can discuss the questions, but you have to write your own answers. And you have to tell us who you collaborate with, and you have to write your own code. There's no pair programming happening. You must do your own coding. And we have plagiarism checkers implemented. We will find you if it matches, and we will just submit those forms to the Dean of Student Affairs. Okay. The primary way of getting in touch is Piazza. Please do not email us. Please do not contact the TAs directly. The primary ways of doing it is through Piazza. If it's not any personal information, please make it a public post so that others can comment on as well. We will, for homeworks, create homework question related threads where it is better to answer those questions on that thread and ask those questions on that thread. Let me see if there are any questions. Will you hold your own office hours as well as the TA office hours? Will all office hours be online? All office hours will be online. I tend to just be around after the lectures. So my office hours are roughly 15 minutes, 30 minutes after every lecture, and that's typically what I do. Understanding homework zero is necessary to understand I have the knowledge that this class requires. Is it sufficient? In other words, if I can do homework zero, it is likely I still do not have some required prior. It's a good question. I think it's fine. If I think you can functionally treat it as sufficient. If you're comfortable on homework zero, there may still be something that comes up in the future, but I think there's enough confidence that if you're over that hurdle, that you'll be able to pick up anything that comes around later. For project details, it states 1 to 5 members on the course website, but the slide says 3 to 4. Are 5 members allowed to be in one group? This is something that I'll cover in later lectures. My expectation from each one person in a project group is that you put in as much work as you do on a homework because it is the same amount of credit. So if you put in 5 people in a team, I expect that together the 5 of you are taking on 5x the amount of work as a homework. So while we will allow it, we strongly encourage you to reconsider that because it is very hard to take on a project which is 5x the amount of scope as a homework assignment. So that's why 3 to 4 is a good recommendation because that's the ballpark that tends to fit in. But you'll find us to be generally reasonable. If you come tell us that you have a large scope project that 5 people need to be on there because you're doing lots of things, we'll allow it. If you tell us that you cannot find someone else to collaborate with because you're doing some niche research and you'd like to work on that, we'll allow it. You'll find us to be reasonable, but our expectations are pretty clear. You add more people, our expectations of your project go up. Okay. Has homework zero been posted? It has been posted. It's available on the class webpage. And I believe. Okay. How do we form teams? We can address this in a later thing. Where will homework zero be posted? Canvas or somewhere else? We will post this on the class webpage. We will also, I believe, post it in Canvas. But our primary thing is class webpage. Please take a look there. We'll post it on Canvas as well. Okay, let us stop there. We're at time. We're in fact a couple of minutes over. So I'll stop there. Hopefully this answered the questions people had. We can answer other things on Piazza. All right, folks. See you next time.